Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this very important visit of the Chief of Army Staff General Bajwa to Iran, where he met not only the Supreme Leader, but the President as well as the Foreign Minister Mr. Jawad Zarif and also the Chief of their Army Staff and also the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. And a lot of issues came under discussion, starting from the Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline to the border security, border patrolling, regarding the issues of the kidnapped guards of Iran, about the certain outfits which are operating in the bordering areas of 950 kilometers between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Obviously, when we talk about the bilateral issues, the regional issues were also a major part of discussion. Issues regarding Saudi Arabia and Iran, issues regarding the current political and regional situation after the presence of the American troops and their assets in that particular region, and looking at the current situation of Yemen also. So these were a couple of very important areas which were discussed thoroughly, and obviously this was the second visit of the Chief of Army Staff to Iran, and they did discuss in detail and in depth all these important issues regarding this particular region. Now, as we all know, that the situation in Afghanistan is pretty fragile. Today there was a story that the Taliban shot down an American helicopter in which two of their pilots were killed. So you can well imagine the intensity of the ongoing situation. On top of that, still we do not know who is the president who's been elected. You talk about the ground situation every other day, another blast is taking place. Regarding Pakistan and Afghanistan, we all know the kind of treatment which we got. When we say we means the staff of the Pakistani embassy there. A lot of people were kidnapped, and this is a continuous sort of an activity going on in that part of the region. So all these issues were very important, not only for Iran but also for Pakistan, and secondly, since Pakistan has played a very important role in diffusing the situation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Now, to talk about this issue, we have got in our studio, let me introduce you to our panelists. On my right is Lieutenant General retired Talat Masood Saab. Needs no introduction, is a senior columnist, writer and a senior analyst. So thank you very much. And we have with us Shahrukh Paracha Saab. Again, needs no introduction, is a known face on TV. Paracha Saab is a senior anchor, a senior journalist. So thank you very much. And we have with us Kamar Chima Saab, who's a foreign affairs expert and also an analyst on the regional issues. Thank you very much, sir. Now, General Saab, first of all, sir, the visit of the Chief of Army Staff along with his DG MI, General Sarfraz Ali, and also the DG of the analysis wing of the ISI, visited Iran, sir, and obviously areas which I earlier spoke about, they all came under discussion. Very comprehensive talks took place. And on top, the Supreme Leader, Mr. Khamenei, the President, Mr. Rouhani, Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif, their Secretary of Supreme National Security Council, along with the Chief of Army, they were all part of that meeting now. So first of all, sir, the significance and the importance of this meeting, sir.
Well, I think it's very important, this visit also, in the sense that most of the problems that are related, as you very rightly explained, between Iran and Pakistan are also security related. So the Chief of the Army Staff, plays a very important role. The military plays a very important role in terms of security of the borders, and also that how important today the military's position is because of several other aspects, including smuggling and also the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran. You also mentioned about them. So I think there is a very major reason why Pakistan and Iran should interact. And then furthermore, at this point of time, the Americans, they have such a strained and a very inimical relationship. The Americans are actually pushing the Iranians. And because of that, they have placed Pakistan in a very difficult position, because Pakistan would like to cooperate as best as it can with Iran, and especially it also would like to sort of expand its trade and other travel and so on and so forth with Iran. But there are great restrictions, because there is restrictions on the movement of people. There are also restrictions as far as money transfer is concerned. So to do trade with Iran, for instance, is extremely difficult because of these circumstances. Then there are also a lot of sanctions which could be imposed if you do any business with Iran. Apart from that, I think the list of problems that face between Iran and Pakistan, or the challenges that the two countries, the common challenges that the two countries face, like for instance smuggling, whether it is drug smuggling or whether it is human smuggling, all these things can only be solved provided there is a greater level of cooperation. And then the border between, the Balochistan border, which shares, and their Balochistan side of the border, both are such areas which are underdeveloped. And because these are underdeveloped, they are also more or less dominated by certain elements which need to be controlled. And for that you need a lot of cooperation. And sometimes when you do not cooperate, then there are also misunderstandings which arise. And because of these misunderstandings, there have been instances when the forces on either side have fired against each other, which never would have happened, because Iran is a very friendly country, is supposed to be an ally, is a Muslim country, is a neighbor, and we would like to sort of improve our relationship.
The chief is also talking about the exchange of cadets.
Yeah. And in the past there have been, exchanges of this nature everywhere, and we would like to sort of extend in the universities and everywhere, we would like to invite the Iranians, and so would our people would like to go there. But at the moment Iran is going through a very difficult period. We also have to understand it's because of these sanctions. Their economy is in great distress.
Absolutely.
And because of that distress, there have been demonstrations within Iran as well.
Oil prices, sir, though it's an oil-producing country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Raja Saab, looking at two aspects. First of all, sir, I was going through an article and I got to know that a little less than a dozen visits of Mr. Jawad Zarif to Pakistan during his tenure, sir. Chief of Army Staff has been there twice. Prime Minister has visited. Even prior to that, Pakistan tried its level best to engage and sort of develop contacts with the Iranians. Do you think, sir, if I may say, that this is the beginning of a new era between the relationship when you talk about Pakistan and Iran, sir? Look at the spectrum, look at the various areas where they can improve. Because when you talk about improving ties, that doesn't mean that you hug the person tight. It means that you need to look into trade, other issues, common problems, common challenges, regional security. So many things come into it. Sir, your take.
Thank you very much. I wish it could have been so simple that we two countries would have been in a position to engage each other as is ideally conceived. There are problems. The problems are of international context. General Saab has very clearly elaborated because of the sanctions, threats. Then the problems are of regional nature, region of Middle East. That in the Middle East region, I'm talking of the context of Iranian and GCC relationship, where Pakistan looks around. Prime Minister was standing there, and Prime Minister said that, although I'm talking of Prime Minister's recent visit, there, and Prime Minister said that, I remember that whenever we were in need, Saudi Arabia came to help us. So this is the reality, in fact. Second issue is, when you talk of bilaterals and more than hugging each other, there are problems on the border between two countries. They have been making accusations against Pakistan. I'm talking of Iranians, that the terrorists, they come
across the border from this side.
Yeah, and you remember the names Rauf Rigi and Abdul Malik Rigi. They were the main suspects in the eyes of the Iranians, and they both were killed. On the other hand, Pakistan does have genuine security threats from their border. You remember a bus, coming from on the coastal highway. The bus was stopped, and then and people were checked from their cards. and whosoever was having security forces card was shot.
They were shot, yes.
Our Jawans, our young person, security men, they got martyred. And you remember who Foreign Minister of Pakistan talked about? The same Foreign Minister, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, he aired his concern that they came from Iran. So, this security concerns on the border on the both sides is one of the major concerns, because of course, it is a border, there are problems on the borders, there is no doubt. But when Pakistan usually does not air these concerns through media, but when Foreign Minister of Pakistan was speaking, it means he was aware of the gravity of the situation.
And the ground situation, yes.
Ground situation, So, it is an effort, and not only that Pakistan has tried to make an effort for bilateral, but Pakistan has also launched 2 efforts for mediation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and the then General Chief of Army Staff General Rahil Sharif, they visited both Riyadh and Tehran. And now this leadership, military and civilian leadership, Prime Minister Imran Khan and Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa, they have also undertaken similar efforts, so that the problem that you are talking, the problem that General Sahab was talking, is the problem of Pakistan, that we cannot afford another war on our door front. We cannot afford the allies forces or the American forces particularly hitting some targets in Iran, or we cannot afford there is a war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That has been the spirit from Pakistan. And
can't afford another Afghanistan-like situation on the western border.
Exactly.
And a quick comment on this point also before I move on to Chima Saab. Prasad, tell me, why can't we have joint patrolling with the Iranians? I mean, we always talk about joint patrolling with the Afghan government, but unfortunately there hasn't been any positive response from that side, though the actual issue is over there. But when we talk about this border, which is comparatively less longer, it's 950 kilometers, why can't we do some sort of an adjustment regarding the areas or something?
950 kilometers is also a long border.
That's a pretty long, I mean, you're right, yeah.
It's not a short border.
And this is also kind of porous border in a way.
It's a porous border, the population is very scanty over there on this border, and wherever there are checkposts, they are also not properly manned. Otherwise, this Kalbhushan Yadav would not have been able to cross into Pakistan, or Mullah Akhtar Mansoor would not have been able to travel so freely, and this information was passed from somewhere else, not from Pakistan, and a drone hit Mullah Akhtar Mansoor, and then this whole blame was in the neck of Pakistan,
When they found the passport.
The passport, the documents, So, 1,000 kilometers is not a small border. We are fencing the border with Afghanistan. Who is paying the cost?
Can't we have a similar engagement with them also?
There are problems on the other side. Their problems are indigenous. What's happening today? The riots, then there are dissident groups within Iran, If they do something because of the porous border, they run into Pakistan, then allegation or accusations are on Pakistan, although Pakistan not doing anything. Pakistan has been fighting against such groups, the killing of Rauf Rigi, or even for that matter, the prosecution of Abdul Malik Rigi, that was with the active cooperation of Pakistan. It should have been recognized and acknowledged by Iran, but unfortunately there were certain announcements that we will invade into Pakistan. They were shocking.
By their
you
army
remember?
chief, yes.
Yeah, you remember. So very shocking for us Pakistanis who consider Iran as not only a neighbor but a brotherly country.
Definitely, sir. Iran is the first country to recognize Pakistan. I mean, the first head of state who visited Pakistan was Shah.
Exactly.
So there is a history. Chima Saab, obviously I want you to take this debate further, but let me add another point here. A similar allegation was made by none other than the Foreign Minister of Iran, Jawad Zarif Saab. I still remember one of his statement. He was in fact indirectly addressing the Saudi Crown Prince. that most likely there is a threat from the Saudis, and that threat is going to be from the Saudis, but from the Pakistani side of the border. If you remember, he said, well, they have said that we will shift this war inside Iran. So obviously, they were saying that, and we have caught few people who they were all miscreants and they were involved in certain notorious activities. So the blame game has been there. Obviously, we do not have much what we have to say to the Iranians, but as far as they are concerned, so I still remember this channel was Al Jazeera, on which I heard the story about a year and a half back. So obviously, there is a problem. There has been issues. There will be issues. Obviously, neighboring countries do have issues. I mean, but the best way forward is to engage in talks and sort them out. But sir, do you believe that the sort of engagement Pakistan has shown, sir, for their safety, for their security also, is good enough? Or do you think Pakistan needs to do more? Or they, in return, have to prove something else as well?
I think, if I would be fair enough, I think both states need to do more. I think in the evolving regional environment in this region where we are, I think Pakistan is looking for broadening its strategic choices. For example, if you just look at that, what kind of bilateral relations we enjoy with Afghanistan, what kind of bilateral relations we enjoy with Iran, and the only country we have good relations, by the way, with China. I think we want to broaden that relationship with Iran. I think the second visit of the Army Chief to Iran in this year, that marks huge significance, and this has never happened this way before. So what matters is that right now, I think what the Iranians have to say is that we have to draw an equation with Iran and with other Arab states, and that equation should be balanced enough, because at some point of time we have failed to make that equation more balanced perhaps. On the other hand, we have security concerns, and that Pakistan soil must not be used by Iran. I think we have been talking to Afghanistan, we have been talking to Iran on this, and we have really serious concern. So I think what matters is that Pakistan would really like at this moment to get more closer to Iran, because we believe that we are not enjoying good ties in this regional matrix where we are. So the only option where we can where our leadership has a penetration, and because with Afghanistan we have done a lot of efforts, we are doing a lot in India. There is no more work to do because things are not giving us space. So only Iran is a place where our leadership has an excess, frankly speaking. So I think this is where we are working, and Iranians also want to work with us, and Iranians have been saying that we need to enhance this cooperation, but only thing, there is a huge mistrust among the institutions, and this the continuity in the mistrust makes the mistrust more deeper.
Yes.
So for example, if when President Hassan Rouhani was here, when the Kulbhushan Yadav story came in, same day. So it means that things are not that good enough, and I think the Iranians have to respect our sovereignty. They must take care of our interests, but at the same time we have to take care of their interests. If some non-state actors are operating from Pakistan, which frankly speaking, Pakistan law enforcement agencies in Balochistan completely eliminated, even with the support of the Iranians. But I think we need to draw an equation. I personally believe myself that we have to draw this equation. Otherwise, because what the Iranians have been saying, that if we just can't have a balance, that will be more good, because when we have to talk about Pakistan-Iran relations, don't bring any other country in that equation or in that matrix. Definitely we can't have, as General Sir mentioned, Paracha Sir mentioned, having trade with Iran is difficult. So the only things which are being discussed with the Iranians are about the security issues, these are the border issues, and how to reduce and minimize this mistrust. You remember when Prime Minister Imran Khan visited Iran and Saudi Arabia, and they were talking to create some, they were helping both the countries. Even then, the Ayatollah Khamenei spoke about this bilateral mistrust between both the countries. Although I didn't hear much bigger words from him that we appreciate Pakistan's efforts for bringing the calm between both the countries, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. He was talking that we have to develop our relations. So if Iran is an Islamic brotherly country, we are an Islamic country. So the world may be looking at us from Islamic lens, but there are deeper issues within this bilateral relations. And I think we have reached to the point where we must not make this issue more worst, because and we have to engage come what may. If we will engage with Iran. That is in our interest, and that is also in the interest. But remember one thing, I believe sometimes the unelected offices in Iran, they are very harsh and tough, and it's very difficult to convince them. The elected offices in Iran, they are more soft, they are more democratic. Their discussions with even the Europeans. If I would say this P5+1, this joint comprehensive plan of action with the Europeans and the Americans, that was because of the President Rouhani and the Foreign Minister Zarif. It was not because of the unelected offices in Iran. So I think this is where Pakistan needs to work with the unelected offices, because elected offices in Iran would love to work with Pakistan. And I think Prime Minister Imran Khan has a goodwill because he's a new Prime Minister. He doesn't have any kind of a baggage. But here, I think in Pakistan's unelected offices, they need to help and they need to make it
You
more
need to get
further.
up. You need to make more effort. Jalsa, it is also, since we were talking about the mistrust and the issue of Kulbhushan Yadav, at the same, not the day, actually the time when Mr. Jawad Zarif was visiting. And eventually they were not very happy about it, because a lot of people did speak to their journalists also who were accompanying the guest here. And they said that, well, basically this should have been the headline, but the next day the headlines all over the newspaper was about Kulbhushan Yadav. But sir, just I want you to comment on this point also, that don't you think, sir, that Pakistan as a neighbor, as a Muslim country, as a brotherly country, has played a very important and significant role when it comes to preventing the escalation in tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran, sir?
Well, yeah, right. I think it has, and it continues to play. And what else one would think of, that the Prime Minister himself, went to Iran and also went to Saudi Arabia, and has always been trying to promote some sort of an understanding between the two countries, because we firmly believe that it is not in the interest of either of these countries, and then it also indirectly affects us and creates problems for its neighbors who want to have good relations with both the countries. And apart from that, then it's also such a sad reflection of the so-called Muslim Ummah, who are supposed to have a fraternity of their own, but instead of that, and then it is also giving rise to Israel's sort of importance in the region, because the Israel exploits this relationship, this inimical and adverse relationship between the two countries, to make sure that Iran is isolated. And then America at the moment is pursuing a very harsh policy. President Trump, as you know, has reversed the whole nuclear process, the nuclear agreement. And the nuclear agreement was, I think, a very fair agreement. And the Iranians were fully abiding by that agreement. There was no reason.
Everyone was happy other than Netanyahu, sir.
There was no violation whatsoever. But the point was that the Israeli Prime Minister and also the Israeli, probably the diehards there, they thought that if there is any country which could challenge Israel in the long term, would be Iran, because of their educational level, because of their technological base and industrial base. It's one country. So what they are trying to do is to completely throttle Iran in that sense. So I think these, and then of course President Trump is playing into the hands of the Israelis as far as the Iranian policy is concerned. And I think it is on their recommendation, and the Jewish lobby that exists in America, it is on their basis that although there are many Jews and who believe that the previous agreement was a good agreement and there was no reason why it should have been scrapped. But nonetheless, then I think as far as Pakistan-Iran relationship is concerned, it is very vital, because it's not only that we are neighbors, but it's a very important neighbor. And both the countries can benefit enormously if we had good relations. And trade and commerce and exchanges and visits to...
Primarily, it's a more common interests you have, the better relationship you have.
And visit to religious places and sites. And here, they can come over to Pakistan for tourism. So I think the economies of both the countries can greatly progress. Because one of the weaknesses of Pakistan, and also perhaps of Iran, but I can't comment on Iran because I'm not so familiar with their economy as far as trade is concerned, I think we can do much more, you know, if and then prevent smuggling also. Because what is happening is that a lot of things are being smuggled from the Iranian border as well
Oil
as
for that
from
matter,
here,
yeah.
from our border to Iran and vice versa. So all that, if that was formalized,
Iran is basically the main route for the human trafficking
and
all the way
human
up.
trafficking also. So I think all these things can be reduced or curbed to a large extent if you know, the border is manned properly, if there is a greater level of trust, which you mentioned earlier. There is a lack of trust, and because of lack of trust, you know, most of these things are happening. And in order to improve the trust, you need greater cooperation at the government level, meeting, and there are certain agreements between the two countries which are fairly comprehensive, but those agreements are not actualized. And because they are not actualized, they lie dormant. Also, that is one reason why I think all these problems.
I still remember when Mr. Ahmadinejad was the president, Paracha Saab, and we were talking about this gas pipeline, and I still remember Pakistan People's Party was in power, and there was a huge delegation which visited Iran, and everything was done, and we were so happy that, you know, the energy crisis will be taken care of. But it's still there, it's pending. So when we talk about trade, sir, and the sanction issue, primarily that is something which is hampering a lot, sir. I still remember once we exported rice worth $1.2 billion to Iran. So, I mean, you can just look at just one product of that, but look at the current level of even bilateral trade. Nothing, I mean, it's not even 200-300 million US dollars, sir. Professor Saab. Trade, agricultural produce trade, maybe some sort of a barter trade. Anything can take place, sir. I mean, how do you move forward in such sanctions, sir?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult in a way, especially we cannot afford extra burden on our own economy if it comes into the regime of sanctions. For example, if any financial entity that is doing business with Iranian financial entities, that will automatically be facing sanctions, not only from the UN, rather when United States has imposed sanctions, so that will draw wrath from the United States and our entities. For example, State Bank of Pakistan will not be able to do any business with the United States institutions. So major discouraging factors for us, at least Pakistan. You talked of barter trade. Barter trade was meant to export, for example, rice and citrus fruits and wheat stuff to Iran, and we could import
Primarily agricultural produce.
Yeah, agriculture produce. But you know, if formal sanctions are there, there are always informal sanctions, you know. That if you enhance your trade and investments, etc., with Iran, then automatically you will get also be focus, which Pakistan at the moment cannot afford. The third thing is very important. General Saab was talking of the security, you know, threats in the Middle East, you know. The Saudi Arabia, Saudis especially, they do have their legitimate security concern, you know, that if Syria, what happened with Syria, Bashar is there still, you know, Iraq went away, you know, then, you know, this used to be called crest, you know. This crest was becoming a moon when, you know, Yemen crisis erupted.
In
and
5 years of Yemen war, sir.
Yeah, you see.
I mean, it looks like a recent phenomenon. Just imagine, look what must have happened in the last 5 years in Yemen. Nobody knows.
And if the Houthis, which Pakistan also says they are rebels, you know, if they have captured power over there, as the Saudi perceptions are that they are supported by Iran, and some boats carrying weapons, when they were seized, the Iranian weapons were recovered, you know.
So Yemeni people couldn't even get food. How can somebody send weapons to them? I mean,
that the boats were captured, in fact, and weapons were recovered, you know. And then after that, UN imposed blockade on the supply of weapon through the, you know, Aden port or other ports, you know. So these concerns of Saudi Arabia, they are accepted by the external world, and that world has imposed these embargoes. But it's a welcome thing that last month or early this month, you know, a peace agreement is brokered by His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and some sort of hopes are there that the Yemen crisis could ease out, because it put pressure on Pakistan. For example, you remember the statement made by UAE Deputy Foreign Minister when Pakistan refused to send troops over there.
Well, they said we betrayed them, and he was so open and so loud. He was a Minister of State of some department.
Anwar's Foreign Affairs.
Foreign
Mr.
Affairs.
Anwar, his name is Anwar. He made this statement, and today we feel that UAE is not as warm as it was with Pakistan because of that crisis.
Even the Saudis.
So this,
when some, some country decides to put our name, put our flag
Exactly.
behind, behind, and suddenly one fine day you do not even know.
Exactly.
Because you were taken for granted, well, since we have said it, they are supposed to follow, and we did not.
and we did not. So that created an
And that was the decision of the parliament, if you remember, sir.
that created an annoyance. So our own interests, because of their problems, between two other countries who are in the region, that is creating problems for Pakistan. Annoyance from Middle East, annoyance from Saudi Arabia, annoyance from UAE and other, Arab groups. This problem should be over, and that's why Pakistani leadership has been trying. And then, you remember Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman interview that we do not want any war with Iran, and that was very welcome. So one side, Saudi Arabia, has been pleading for peace, and that's why this Yemen agreement was signed, and then statements, an overture maybe for Iran. Let's see what happens, but Pakistan's quest has been there that at least these two countries should never fight a war. Whatever Israel wants or whatever other wants. Even Prime Minister in one of media interactions, I was also there. Prime Minister pleaded that we do not want war. Only one country wants a war, and that was identified as Israel over there.
Now, Chima Saab, the role of Iran in the region, whether you talk about Iran's role in settling Afghanistan issue, or for that matter, sir, in settling the Yemeni issue or the Syrian issue, because when you look at Middle East, sir, there are a lot of proxy wars going on. And every time, whether there's an attack in in Saudi Arabia on the oil fields, Iran is blamed. Again, recently we've been hearing that certain ships and oil tankers were stopped by the Iranian coast guards, and there was a lot of hue and cry all over, and we read so many stories coming in the newspapers. Now, sir, do you believe the presence of the American assets in that region, having more troops in Saudi Arabia, having more new sorts of naval destroyers and these aircraft carriers present in that region, is that a threat? And if it is a threat, sir, do you think Iran is in a position to gauge USA, sir, at some level? Or, for example, if the war, God forbid, if a war takes place between the Americans and the Iranians, don't you think this is going to engulf the whole region, sir?
Well, I think our Arab friends got frustrated when there was an attack on the oil field, because I think Iran is also frustrated now because that there is no breakthrough. There are crippling sanctions, and then there is no breakthrough from Europe. Even this joint comprehensive plan of action was dismantled, and with the Arab friends, with the Muslim friends, there is no breakthrough. So I think they were annoying the Saudis, and they were annoying the British, and capturing the the ships in the open seas, and they calling them that they are in our territory. So I think the Arabs understand the vulnerability, especially the Emiratis understand the vulnerability, because even if the UAE is a bigger country, but it's a sort of an artificial place. There are huge towers there, but they can come down in hours and minutes if the Iranians display their military power. I think the Emiratis will avoid that to every extent. Even the Saudis have a huge territory; they can afford any war. The Emiratis can't afford that war. So I think definitely Pakistan would not like to happen anything like that. And so this recently breakthrough which happened when Prime Minister Imran Khan asked that the President Trump has asked me to go for a breakthrough between the Saudis and the others, and the Saudis are giving statement, we have not asked anyone to break through and so and so.
Exactly
but
what we
it
heard,
was
yeah.
because they feared, everyone was fearing that if something happens, God forbid, because the Iranians are frustrated and they want, even if they want that, okay, if there is a limited scale conventional war, let it be for some time, just see what happens, what comes out of it. And one thing has happened out of this, and the American have sent more troops, and with this, the more money is going to the Americans, and they are happy because they are selling their weapons, they are giving the positive security assurances to the Gulf friends. So I think here, what matters at the moment is that Iranians would like, openly they won't say that, but Iranians believe that since they are there in Yemen, they are giving kind of a subtle support to the Houthis, and Iranians are in Syria, they are in
country
Iraq.
which is under tremendous sanctions. Do you think they can still support a rebel movement, or for example, it is believed that they have got a lot of influence in in Palestine, in Syria, in Yemen, in so many other countries, Iraq even?
I think they are facing sanctions since last 40 years. This is not a new thing.
But they've survived.
But
they've never grown. They've survived.
Yes, they have a hard time, but at the same time, I think they have been somehow they have been helping, or they have been working with these groups. It's not that they are definitely in Syria. It is the Iranians and the Russians who have supported the Syrians, even in Iraq, because now Iran believes that we have to fight the Islamic State because, and while going deep into Iraq, not just being on the border. So definitely, if to some extent, to the Iranian estimates, the Saudis have spent more than $50 billion in this Yemeni conflict. So they believe that yes, let's engage our enemy.
And they realized also.
Yeah. So the Saudis have engaged.
It took them 5 years, but at least they realized. Yes.
These are unnecessary, uncalled for wars, and I think this is where the Crown Prince, who was defense minister when he initiated this thing. So I think the Saudis will also like to end that, but who comes first, that matters, and definitely the Iranians want a space to enter somewhere where, and for this, even if they have to go to a limited scale military conflict, in my understanding, even they won't shy because they believe they can afford.
Depending again whether they can afford it or not, because if you look at the Turkish, for example, stance, I mean, they believe that there is a lot of problem from the Kurdish rebels, and they have actually attacked the northern part of the Syria. So wherever you feel threatened or wherever there's a conflict of interest, you obviously will look after yours, or any other country would look after theirs. But anyway, sir, I was just told that we're totally running out of time. Rajal Saab, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you, Pras Saab. Thank you so much, Iva Saab. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you again tomorrow, inshallah. Till then, take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.